Tonight on Real, we dig deep into Melbourne's culture to reveal some of the more interesting and unusual jobs in our community. We look at the evolution of the horse and cart from its rural transport days to becoming a metropolitan tourist attraction. And we catch up with a local tattoo artist to talk about identity and individuality expressed through body art. Hi, I'm Emily Burley, and welcome to La Trobe University's Real, the program that investigates Melbourne's diverse culture from the perspective of young people. Tonight, we're investigating the idea of preserving identity and leaving your mark on the world. Later in the program, we will be exploring the weird and wonderful world of taxidermy in the short documentary, The Arrangement of Skin, with taxidermist Gary Pegg showing us the ins and outs of this fascinating industry. It's well into the 21st century, and although technology is mainly a godsend, many industries and traditions are dying out. With new lifestyles and brands competing for our loyalty, it's easy to lose sight of the things that make us, us. But what about the good old days? What about the times when we respected sentimental value and tradition? Well, thankfully, some people in our community are still keeping those ideals alive. When we think Italian, we think food. Pizza, pasta, meatballs and salami. But do you know the tradition behind the humble salami? The love and labour that goes into it? Well, we met some people who do.
Hi, my name is John and this is my mum, and today we're making salami. The tradition was lost when my nonno passed away and I picked it up about 5 years ago. Hopefully one day I can pass this tradition on to my children and they can keep it going for future generations. And we make sure it's all mixed through. Pivotal part of the thing, it needs to all be mixed through. If it's not mixed through properly, then you won't get an even consistency when your salami come out at the end. So now it's we fill this up. This is the machine to pack it into the casing and put all the meat in here. Preserving this tradition is very important to me as an Italian Australian, as it helps me reach back to the roots of my heritage. Even though I'm unable to speak Italian, this tradition of making salami enriches the Italian culture that I'm so very proud of. Make sure we leave a little bit of extra netting on the top because we tie it from the netting to hang them instead of from the actual skin. And we pull it through and then we cut it off here. And there we go, that's basically finished product and that's ready to hang and eat in about 4 weeks time.
In the days before social media and mobile phones, getting mail meant handwritten letters in the post. It was intimate and special, a message just for you. Letters to Lani is an initiative that encourages people to personalise their correspondence. We caught up with Lani herself to tell us more about her pen pal inspired project.
A couple of months ago I set up a letter writing project on Facebook. I made an event and I just invited a lot of friends and family and people that I knew and said, write me a letter, tell me about your day, tell me, tell me about yourself, write me a story, I don't care. I want to know you through your handwriting, through the way that you write, and I think that's really special. I just wanted to learn more about my friends in a way that we hadn't communicated before, And it's really special to receive something in the mail that isn't like a bill or something like that. I have been really surprised by some of the responses that I've received. Some of them are very formal sounding and some of them are very casual and some of them are so personal that they've honestly made me cry, but in a beautiful way, I always respond, I suppose, in terms of how the person has opened up to me. if their letter has been very personal, I feel that I should respond in the same way. And, you know, if they've gone into depths to open themselves up to me, then I should definitely do the same. When I was younger, my nan and I used to write letters to each other all the time. Although she lived next door, it was so personal and lovely to receive a handwritten letter from her saying things that I already knew. I suppose every time I saw her handwriting, it really made me feel closer to her in a way. I've made a drawer in my room that's just full of all of these personal secrets and beautiful stories that people have told me, and I really hope that it encourages other people to start writing letters to their family, to their friends, you know, because it's really beautiful to receive them.
Welcome back. You're watching Real. Taxidermy is often looked upon as a dark and gruesome practice. In Hitchcock's Psycho, Norman Bates stuffed birds, and look how he turned out. In reality, however, taxidermy is an old business, meaning the arrangement of skin in Greek. It describes the art of preparing, stuffing, and displaying animal skins for museums, exhibitions, hunters, and collectors. Melbourne taxidermist Gary Pegg takes us inside his Thomastown studio to show us just how it's done. And a warning, the content in this documentary may be disturbing to some viewers.
The process itself, taxidermy, it comes from the Latin of taxi meaning movement and dermy meaning skin. So the whole concept is to remove the skin and treat it and then make or reproduce the animal into a lifelike pose. As a teenager, I even kept live birds in an aviary, and to have birds die and then think that they were just going to be thrown away, it was a terrible waste of some beautiful birds. So that was probably the first, or the primary reason why I started in taxidermy. And, that was in the mid-70s. You know, back then there was no computers, no internet, no YouTube. It was either books or what we had back then was, you know, mail order correspondence courses. I competed at the World Show, and I won the World Champion bird, which is actually this bird that's up here, and was fortunate to win the Best of Show for the bird, and won the Masters Division and the Competitors Award. So it was a good campaign. Our team comprises of 2 full-time people here at the moment. One of our older staff members here, Paul, does a lot of the mammals and game heads here for us. And then we have Stephanie, who's involved with a lot of the finishing work and smaller mounts that we do. With the processing, it depends whether it's a mammal or a bird. Basically, with the mammals, we need to tan the skin, that is, remove all the impurities out of the skin and then turn it into leather. Birds is a similar process, but not as involved, simply because it's a thinner skin.
At the moment, I'm just removing some of the excess flesh off the sandbidea tape that I'm working on. One of the later processes, I'll be salting it up, so getting rid of this excess flesh helps the salt absorb the moisture a bit easier and get into all the crevices that it needs to get to. It's
basically with the mammals, it's a leathering process, and with birds, it's as simple as removing the skin, putting them through a machine to take out any grease or impurities out of the skin, you know, the fatty layers of the skin.
This is a tumbling machine. We've got 2 sides to it. The first side's got sawdust in it and the other's just a cage. So the treated skins will go into the side with the sawdust and it'll help absorb any excess moisture. And once it's been tumbling around for a few minutes, then we'll shake out the sawdust and put it on the other side, and that'll get rid of any of the extra bits of sawdust or debris that's left in the cape.
Once we've completed the tanning process of the hide, we can move into mounting the skin on our replica body. So, for example, we'll have measurements of the carcass that we've taken the hide off. We use that as a gauge in the reconstruction of the artificial body, which is made out of the polyurethane foam. Once we do our trial fits and we know that the skin is going to fit the replica body, we go about then cutting all the various lip slots and eye slots and that in order to tuck the mouth and the eyes in.
So now I'm pushing the lips up where they belong, like that. So you get a nice looking face.
We'll set glass eyes in our replica body. We'll put glue on the skin and we glue the skin over the replica body. Once it's dried, once the glues have set and it's dried, which could take a couple of weeks, we'll then come back and do all the finishing work with fillers and paint work around the soft parts, which is all the eyes, the nose and the lip area of the animal.
So at the moment I'm just filling in the gap between the skin and the glass eyeball, and we'll paint that. Will be the last stage with the airbrush, and then it'll be ready for collection.
Strange enough, we've had a few requests in the past for people who've wanted tattoos preserved or parts of their body that have, for reasons of medical problems, that they want to preserve, but we've not entertained into that area. Needless to say, there's museums in Japan now that have been set up for the preservation of tattoos by some of the great artists. And I think we'll probably see those sorts of concepts even come into Australia, because tattooing is very popular, and I think you'll find that as some of the masters themselves pass on, well, their work is of course on the people in the street, and they may elect to go down the same process of preserving their own skin.
Welcome back to Real. I'm joined now in the studio with Professor of Archaeology, Tim Murray. Professor Murray, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Now, first of all, let me ask you your thoughts on the documentary.
I thought it was really interesting. Apart from learning what taxidermy actually meant, I thought it meant stuffed animal as distinct from moving skin. It was just really interesting to see the process. I didn't know very much about it at all.
Now, you work in archaeology, which also deals with preservation in a different way. What areas of this field have you exclusively worked in?
I've worked in lots of parts of it, but most recently in the archaeology of the modern city in North America and Europe and in Australia from the 18th and 19th centuries. But most recently I was working on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, doing African Iron Age archaeology.
And what goes into that? Like, could you...
A lot of hard work, wandering up and down the sides of a mountain through banana plantations. But it's mostly about identifying sites and excavating them and contributing to the history of that part of Africa, which is both complex and very interesting.
Now, how does the practice of archaeology enhance the knowledge of a person or a culture's identity?
Well, I think the first point is that for 99% of human history, it's the only source of information there is, given the fact that writing happened recently, so recorded history. But the most important thing is that even in times when there are recorded history, material culture and the analysis of sites where people lived gives you a great deal of information about the people who are never written into history. These are people for whom there are no historical records, generally the people who are poor, who are marginalised in society.
Okay, and you were involved with the excavation of the exhibition building.
Yep.
What is the importance of preserving the history of a place like that?
Well, I think the first thing again is that it's a World Heritage listed building, and it's a very important part of the history of Melbourne itself, but the history also of a movement that was in the 19th and 20th centuries, sort of disseminating technology and culture around the world. But the excavations we did at the exhibition building mostly were to do with the management plan, which had to be developed for the building when it became part of the World Heritage List, which was to make it sustainable. So we were actually excavating in an area that was being turned into a reservoir for water that was harvested off the roof of the building to be used in the gardens that surrounded it.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And how do you think preserving the past shapes who we are today?
Well, if we've got this wrong, then we've spent a lot of money over nothing, because archaeology is very expensive. But I think it's very clear that it does. If you look at the number of countries that have invested significant sums in investigating the archaeology of their nation, I mean, good examples being India. The Archaeological Survey of India is an enormous undertaking. But virtually every country in the globe invests money in understanding its history through archaeology. So there's a very clear connection between archaeology and identity.
Professor Murray, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Now let me take you back in time. It's the 1800s, and in the days before trains, planes and automobiles, the horse and cart was the only way to get around. Holly Flynn and I ventured into the city to show you how this historical mode of transport is still going strong.
Note the ease with which the passengers refrain from falling out the rear door. Get up.
These days, it's not uncommon to get inked. Whether it's an intricate design or a corny catchphrase you're after, tattoos are the modern way of wearing your heart on your sleeve. Sarah Wall and Jake Edgar spoke to local tattooist Shane Saw to meet the artist behind the art.
It's something I've always wanted to do. I've been interested in tattoos since I was probably 4 years old. I was first, sort of telling, all the grown-ups around me that that's what I'm going to do when I grow up. And I think a lot of people like to identify themselves with tattoos. There's always going to be that old sort of stereotype, sort of judging tattooed people as maybe on the rougher side of life, but it's definitely not true in my experience. And it's quite humbling and an honour that, people trust their bodies with my, skill, and I get to apply, my visions on people's bodies forever, and I think that's a big part of what attracted me to it.
At the moment, I'm actually covering up an old tribal style design with a Japanese influenced dragon, and the idea is basically to get rid of this old tribal so that you'll never know it was there. So basically just getting rid of some old memories and creating some new positive ones, and yeah.
Everybody says that it's such a permanent art form, but it's actually probably the least permanent form of art, because tattoos generally only exist as long as the person does, as opposed to a painting on canvas, which can be there for hundreds and hundreds of years. The idea of preserving actual tattoos on skin after a person's passed away is pretty fascinating. But personally, I don't know that I'd want to be skinned, so to speak, and framed. You know, I had considered the thought, but I'm definitely not against it. It is probably a creepy idea for a lot of people, but you know, it is still art at the end of the day, so you know, it's all in the eye of the beholder. If the canvas happens to be skin, then I suppose it's up to the individual to decide whether that's, you know, appropriate or not.
Well, thankfully, it seems there is still a need for preservation these days, and maintaining tradition and history through our work and passions is important. To leave your mark in this world, you need to be proud of what you do and not be afraid to be a little bit different. Well, that's all we have time for tonight. But before we go, we thought we'd leave you with the best bits of Series 5 of Real.
This season, the theme of Real is identity and belonging, and tonight we're focusing on gender identity.
The most colourful man, not with that most tattoo.
Today we're making salami.
I like the pace of it, the style of it, and I like the fact that it gave Matt a lot of time to talk.
Tonight we'll be exploring the concept that what we wear on the outside has the ability to reflect what's going on inside.
Welcome back to Real. Now we'll be taking a look at...
I always wear this one.
Real, the program that investigates Melbourne's diverse culture.
So being kawaii can be feminine.
And this one.
What John Rogers and his film.
Sort of activity, and what this sort of culture does is offer.
For 99% of human history, it's the only source of information there is.
Who's someone from the US, as you can see here.
Thank you very much for joining us here today.
And then
just hold it. Amazing.
We hope to see you all back here next year for another season, but until then, thanks for watching. I'm Emily Burley. Good night.